They're not just hairy orcs that only present a threat to low-level parties. Gnolls are a wave of destruction sweeping through the wilderness. Maybe you've been running gnolls that way, just another option for your first through third level players that offers a little different flavor from the typical orc or goblin encounters. Maybe they're even a little boring. But gnolls, with their demonic origins, scavenging ways, and unending hunger, might just present a much greater threat than you realize, even as your party levels up. Hey there, adventurers. My name is Judd, and this is Short Rest Studios, where we believe fun builds community. And today we're talking about how you can make gnolls what they should be in your D&D game, a deadly, animalistic force. And stick around to the end, because in addition to giving you the tactical rundown, I'm going to give you some suggestions for pulling gnolls into your campaign. First, let's take a look at 5e Gnoll Lore. And I'm looking strictly at the 2014 version because gnolls have been changed dramatically in the latest monster manual. I am, however, going to reference monsters of the Multiverse for some additions to our strategy. The first gnolls were hyenas that fed on the leftovers of the demon lord Yeenoghu. That caused them to be transformed into the upright nightmares we know as gnolls. Like their progenitors, they're nomadic scavengers. They're always hungry. They prey on the weak. They take weapons and armor and maybe even body parts as trophies of their hunts. And because of the demonic power that transformed them, they're pure, chaotic evil. The average gnoll is not smart. In fact, their intelligence sits about halfway between an actual hyena and the average human. That means that, generally speaking, they're going to act on instinct. They don't value honor or courage like an orc would. They simply exist to destroy and to devour. And while there are some members of a gnoll horde who are smarter and tougher, if the average gnoll thinks it's getting too hard, they'll move on to weaker targets. All that said, your basic gnoll is strong and driven by violence and hunger. Their stat block shows that they're armed with spears, longbows, and their teeth, and they have dark vision. While they only get a single action per turn, the thing that really sets them apart is their rampage feature. Once they've dropped an opponent to 0 HP with a melee attack, they can use their bonus action to move half their speed, that would be 15 feet, to make a bite attack. So what does this mean gnolls will look like in a combat encounter? First of all, I'm going to agree with Keith Amon, whose book and blog, The Monsters Know What They're Doing, has had a huge influence on me, as I've said before. These guys' greatest effectiveness is in melee combat. That rampage bonus action only works in melee, so why would they bother with carrying a longbow? I'd get rid of it. If you want gnolls that make ranged attacks, Monsters of the Multiverse gives us a much better option, and we'll get to that later. These demon doggos, they're most definitely not good boys. Will just run in focused on the weakest members of your party, the ones that are obviously smaller or wounded, and rip them up with bite and spear attacks, which do an average of 4 and 6 piercing damage respectively, taking full advantage of that rampage feature to move on to new targets when they drop one. That means they'll gang up on single targets and constantly shift to new ones if they're up against a weak party or even a stronger one when their numbers are overwhelming. Your party's only hope might be that gnolls operate purely on instinct and will likely run if they get hurt too badly. And remember, they have dark vision. I can't think of anything more terrifying than hearing the cackling of distant hyenas in the night just before your camp is overrun by a gnoll warband, starting with the party members who don't have dark vision, since, they'll have advantage against those opponents. And with those numbers, they'll likely be led by a Gnoll Pack Lord. The Pack Lord has the same AC 15 as standard gnolls, but they have more than double the HP at 49. They're still not smart with an 8 intelligence, but they're smarter. Their tactics probably aren't going to be much different than the rest of the pack, but they are tougher. They can make 2 attacks per turn with their glaive or longbow. Again, I'd still ditch the longbow. And these guys, especially since the glaive actually gives them an additional 5 feet of reach in melee, they also have, in addition to sharing that rampage bonus action with their lesser pack members, the ability to incite Rampage as an action. And yes, it can be used as part of their multi-attack, meaning they can attack and still use this ability. Incite Rampage, which is a rechargeable ability, causes one creature within 30 feet that can hear the Pack Lord and that has the Rampage trait to use its reaction to make a melee attack. So the Pack Lord can attack you and then make somebody else attack you, or one of your party members. Then just for fun, why don't we drop in a Gnoll Fang of Yeenoghu? These are quote-unquote blessed by the demon lord and possess a demonic spirit that gives them more HP, greater strength, and even more intelligence. Now they're smart enough to actually reason. Plus, if a hyena feeds on a Fang's leftovers, it will transform into a new Gnoll. Fangs don't carry weapons, but they have 1 bite and 2 claw attacks per turn for an average of 6 or 7 damage each. And of course, they can still rampage. As I said, a Fang is actually kind of smart with a 10 intelligence. Amon says that not only does that mean they'll have the reasoning to move around and pick weak targets better than their compatriots, but they can, in a sense, read your PC's hit points and AC so they know just who to attack, the weak ones. While the rest of the horde is ganging up on individual targets, the Fang is being more strategic and constantly moving between targets. An important thing to keep in mind is that while the standard Gnoll is a humanoid, Fangs of Yeenoghu are classified as fiends, and that makes them susceptible to certain character class traits in Magic, like protection from evil and good. Now those are the variants in the monster manual, but Monsters of the Multiverse gives us a couple more that I'll mention briefly. But first, if you're looking to take your next session somewhere weird and wonderful, check out the Wandering Tavern from today's sponsor, Homie and the Dude. The Wandering Tavern is a sprawling 180-plus page system-agnostic Studio Ghibli-inspired floating city. You get optional D&D 5e stats, huge battle maps, loads of unique NPCs, and cool magic items to protect yourself from the twisted spirits that are stalking the halls. With plot hooks that lead to dark, forgotten secrets, black market empires, and more, there are endless tales to tell in the Wandering Tavern. Hit the link in the description and use code SHORTREST to get 20% off your order. Monsters of the Multiverse gives us the Gnoll Flesh Gnawer. That's fun to say. Other than having a gross name, this guy doesn't offer much that's different from the standard Gnoll. Slightly lower AC, same hit points. Their intelligence and dex are the same as the Pack Lord. The sudden rush feature is the only thing that makes this guy interesting. Basically, they can charge into combat faster than other Gnolls, running right past other enemies, since this feature doesn't provoke an opportunity attack, to get at their chosen target. They still don't have the wisdom to be quite as discerning as the Fang of Yeenoghu when choosing targets, though. The Gnoll Hunter, though, this guy is your sniper. They have decent dex and a +4 in stealth, making them pretty great at ambushes. And they'll be even better than the Fang at picking out weak targets with a 12 wisdom. The Hunter has special barbed arrows that slow the target down by 10 feet on a hit, making the longbow an actually effective weapon for him. So let's say you have a huge group of Gnolls ganging up on the weaker targets in your party. The Pack Lord inciting even more attacks and the Fangs skillfully picking off the stragglers. Since Hunters can make 2-bite, spear, or longbow attacks per turn, they're perfect for sniping from the shadows in the middle of all the chaos and then running down the target for the kill. I said I'd give you some suggestions for dropping Gnolls into your game, and here they are. First off, you always want to think about your enemy's motivations. In this case, it's pretty straightforward. They're always hungry, and they're incredibly vicious. Their entire motivation is to move through the wilderness anywhere in the world, mind you, ravaging villages and devouring travelers. This means they make sense for random encounters almost anywhere, especially at night. It also means they can be kind of boring if they're not handled right. But what if there was more to it? Gnolls will hunt in large numbers. So imagine your party is being trailed through the wilderness by a Gnoll horde. Occasionally a scouting party will move in, probably with a hunter or two ambushing your PCs, while a few Gnolls come in and make trouble. But the attacks increase in size and frequency over time as you're traveling. But what if your BBEG actually somehow incited these Gnolls to hunt you? Even Orcs won't partner up with these guys, but maybe your villain has manufactured events to cause them to follow you. thinking you're up to something. Maybe they placed some magical mark on one of your players, or pretended to be Yeenoghu tasking them with a mission, or somehow convinced them that following you would lead them to a horrific feast that might finally sate their hunger. These gnolls will dog your party's steps, pun intended, wherever they go. Say they decide to spend the night in a village. The gnolls who've been ambushing and attacking the party with greater and greater severity throughout their journey attack the village with the full force of their horde. Gnolls, Pack Lords, and Fangs run rampant through town as hunters snipe from the shadows and pounce on the wounded, feasting on their kills and burning the village to the ground. Then your players make the choice to avoid civilization at all costs, even though gnolls would probably avoid an actual fortified city, which this just prolongs the torture. And here's a suggestion I heard in a video from several years ago. I'll link to it in the description. What if your gnolls are disease-ridden, as a horde of scavengers might actually be? Not only would they be dangerous enemies, but close contact like melee combat could expose your party to that disease. And what if that disease was Cackle Fever? In 1d4 hours, a character begins to manifest symptoms and gains a level of exhaustion that they keep until they're cured. And the symptoms? Any event that causes them stress, like entering combat or taking damage or even having a nightmare, means they have to make a DC 13 con save or take 1d10 psychic damage and become incapacitated for 1 minute with mad laughter. Appropriate? Yes. Yes, it is. But listen, for real, keep in mind we're all trying to have fun. Make it challenging for your players. Scale the encounters up for higher level parties, but remember that these guys are deadly. Hey, thanks for watching, adventurers. Tell me about your favorite encounters with low CR monsters in the comments. And if you got something out of this video and you want more of this kind of content, like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And please consider supporting this channel by joining the Adventurers Guild at patreon.com/shortreststudios, or by hitting the join button that's right under this video. Check out this video for some tips on running better encounters with another classic D&D monster, and I'll see you next time on Short Rest Studios.